Hey everyone, happy to see so many people. How many of you in here are game developers? A majority? How many are press? And others? Okay, cool. How many of the game developers are more than 20 people? Okay, cool. When I'm not on stage here at GDC, my everyday job is to lead a company called Paradox Interactive, which I've been doing for close to 11 years. Actually, exactly 11 years now, August 15. So it's some sort of celebration. And today I was going to talk about the impact of cloning of games and how to stand out. And the more I dug into this presentation, the more I figured out that from a management and conceptual perspective, standing out is a very, very interesting issue. And everyone who knows me, everyone who worked with me, knows that I'm not a programmer, I'm a crappy game designer, and I'm an even worse artist. So if you take that as a statement, because it is a statement, it's actually true, then you can listen to this from a management perspective. I'm specializing in business development, in contracts, and in everything that impacts your company and your games, except for maybe the game itself. I've worked with acquisition of games for 7 years. I've worked with contracts and business for 11 years. So I see a lot of gaming concepts. I think I know what I like. I play a lot of games. I have over 1,000 hours logged into League of Legends. So I'm an avid gamer, but everything else is business for me. And standing out in the market today, if you take 10 years ago, everything was very, very... there were bottlenecks in the market everywhere. So on the consoles, not even we at Paradox could publish a console game because it was too expensive. There were too many green light committees and Microsoft and Sony, and everything was just high budget and really high to get into. Steam used to have their green light up until half a year ago or something. So when mobile came and took the market by storm, everyone started opening up. It started with Steam, who accepted more and more games. And when they let go of Greenlight, there were 75 PC games released the same day, which must be some sort of new world record. The same goes for consoles. Even Microsoft and Sony are now saying that we want to support indies, which essentially means we want to have more games on our platforms, which in itself means that competition is going to be even more fierce. And I'm going to talk from all these successes and all the failures that we've had at Paradox as well. So I'm going to share some anecdotes and some stories on my 11 years of running this company. So like I said about me, I'm the CEO and principal owner of Paradox. I have shipped over 70 games in the last 10 years. And 5 of those franchises eventually became million sellers. And my specialization here today is mostly business development. So I'm going to talk about this subject in a very conceptual way. And you'll have hopefully at least 10 minutes in the end to ask me questions about how I see the market and where we're going. And Paradox Interactive as a company, I'm not sure if everyone is familiar with us, but we're a fast-growing, hardcore publisher of games. We've been growing with 36% a year since 2008. On the PC platform, which makes it a bit less sexy because the focus on the market in the last 5-6 years has been mobile growth, where a lot of companies have made some really great successes. So we took advantage of the Steam system, of digital download on PC, and grew really quickly with our current franchises and built some new franchises on that as well. Today we're over 150 people across 3 offices, and our headquarters is in Stockholm in Sweden. We have 4 internal studios working on 7 different games at the moment. And we have another 10 studios that are working for us on contract, meaning another 200 people who are making games for us on a daily basis. These studios are based in UK, Brazil, Finland, the United States, basically all over the Western world. So we're really used to working internationally. If you take cloning of games, I mean, everyone is borrowing from everyone in this industry. We know that. We do that at times. Sometimes we'll look at things. Once I was in a meeting with a guy who said, you know what? the diplomacy system in this game is taken from a game called Europa Universalis. Do you know that game? So I looked at him, and then he looked at me, and I looked back, and he looked at me and said, oh yeah, you made that game. That's how it goes, right? So everyone's borrowing from everyone. So I looked into the history, like, for how long have people been stealing games from each other? Because it's really interesting. The first game that was actually accused of stealing was no other than Atari's game Pong. Many people think that Pong was the first game actually in history, but it turns out that a console called the Magnavox Odyssey released a game called Tennis 2 years before Pong. So they threatened to sue Atari and take them to court, and Atari settled outside court, licensed the game, and released Pong, and the rest is history. So it starts in 1972, actually, and then it just follows in a line with more or less successful clones of other games. If you take games like Space Invaders, there are 20 different clones of that. You have Asteroids that were early in the market. We talk early arcade days. But other games that have spawned not only clones, but entire genres are Defense of the Ancients, as you know, Dota, which was a Warcraft 3 mod to begin with, Super Mario Bros., Guitar Freaks that turned into a whole music genre as well with Rock Band, Guitar Hero, whatnot. And, of course, numerous mobile games as well. In mobile, you don't only borrow the game concept, but you also steal the name. There are 20 different temple runs, temple jump, temple hide, just to try to fool the iTunes system of searching. Same goes for Flappy Bird, which is not really my type of game, but I found on my iPad, when I lent it to one of my kids, I found a game called Splashy Fish. So I thought, wow, this is really terrible. It's like taking terrible to a new level. So I actually played some Splashy Fish as well. I got to level 63. Is this necessarily something bad? Is it bad to borrow other people's ideas, being inspired by what other people are doing? I would say that, no, it's not really. It's actually helping our business going forward. Newton said that when you're standing on the shoulder of giants, it's much easier to make new inventions. So his idea that other people invented things first and then you refine them throughout history. And the same goes actually for games, at least if you ask me. In brief, you can say that if you borrow something, it's a shortcut to approved gameplay, approved market, maybe even a proven business model that you see that works for other people, and therefore you want to emulate it and be inspired by it. But there are also different ways of actually going into a market if you want to borrow a concept from someone. You can do like the guy who was in a meeting with me and said they took the whole diplomacy system from Europa Universalis. Now, that is just taking one of the features. If you do a direct copy of the game, it's typically to ride on a genre that is very popular at the moment. You see the MOBA genre, that most of the games look and feel almost the same. And they're trying to spin off on the same that people already know the gameplay, they already know how to pay for the games, they already know how the whole system of esports work within that genre. So it's a smart way to do it, but there are also some challenges and some advantages in doing that. I'll get back to that later. Inspired by is a good way to say that you take inspiration from other people. It's typically a homage to another title, something that plays a bit with the original. And in all other aspects, it's a game totally on itself. And a spiritual successor is actually a good way to go into this market because a spiritual successor typically aims at an abandoned genre with abandoned games where people are dreaming of the old glory days of gaming. And when you bring back a game in that genre, people are going to hail you as a savior who's doing something not entirely new, but at least something that adds to an underserved audience and an underserved niche. So if you're going into, we're in these situations daily, you look at your game concept and say, okay, so what am I going to do with my game? How much can I be inspired by other people? How do I need to work to make my game stand out, no matter the actual gameplay value and the actual things that you do in the game? And that's where I come in typically, because we work a lot at Paradox with taking the game aside, saying, how do we make the game stand out communication-wise from a company standpoint and in all other aspects that are not typically gameplay related? Basically, making sure that you communicate the personality of the game instead of what you're actually doing. So if you walk into the pros and cons when you go into this market, inspired by market, why people do this is that they know what the market size roughly is. When you hear that Candy Crush Saga has over 100 million daily or monthly users, it's very tempting to go into that area. It's a known market size. The market size for that type of game is at least 100 million players if you hit the right mark. It also has a proven game design, which means that people know what they're supposed to do in the game. So Candy Crush is in many ways borrowed from many other games. Like Match 3 is something that I think Bejeweled did at least 20 years ago. But refining it, making it new, repackaging it, making it a bit more fun for people to play, makes it a 100 million monthly user game. Let's see here. The quality benchmark, obviously, you can look at what other people has done and say, this is the actual quality that they have, this is what we're striving for as well. And you can also use this to remove things from the game. And I'm going to get back to some examples of that later on as well. There are also, of course, backsides. When you get inspired by a game, when you walk into a new area and you see that you take certain gameplay elements from other people, what are going to happen? First of all, journalists and gamers, they always say that they want new things. They want new concepts. They want something that stands out in the gameplay itself. Well, to be honest, this industry is a bit conservative. It's to be so young, it's very conservative, and people will be very entitled about what you guys are doing as soon as you walk into this territory. So the first thing that is going to happen if you walk into the territory of borrowing a bit or inspired by is the PR challenge. Because journalists are going to ask you, like, so what game is this? Compare this to another game. Because you never get away with saying, well, this is a game that is totally unique and stands on its own feet. At Paradox will always get that question. So, what other game is this game like? There are a few ways to get out of that question. And there are a few methods. So I'm going to come to the method chapter later on. But that's the first question that comes up, and that's something you have to be prepared for. Because the press say they want new things. Truth is, they actually are pretty nostalgic. There is a reason why there are so many retro gaming shows and where there are so many people talking about like the best games from the 90s and everything like that. You can also, if you go into this, you can inherit a very demanding target audience. So people see that you're doing something that they recognize and they want to be a part of that. Because they say like, I played the game that you're basing your game on for 10 years. I played 2,000 hours. So I can probably design this game better than you can. So that is also a challenge. The demanding target audience. They're your best friends in some ways. And in some ways, they're very, very challenging to handle. I have one example of that. We actually bought an IP. It was not even an inspired by or a clone or something that was actually taken from someone else. We bought an IP, it was Majesty, the Fantasy Kingdom sim. Did anyone play that? Yeah. We made Majesty 2. Did anyone play that as well? Yeah, cool. Good to hear. And the first thing that happened was that we got approached by a lot of fans saying like, you have to do this, you have to do that, you have to do this. And this is like 7 years ago, I think. And we said, you know what, we're great game designers. We can do whatever we want to do. So shut up and stay on the forums. And we did not communicate that well with the audience. So what happened was that, first of all, they made up a lot of conspiracy theories about what we were actually going to destroy in this game, because our intention, obviously, was to destroy the franchise when we bought it, right? That's why you buy a franchise. It's to completely destroy it. Same thing happened with Star Wars and Disney, actually, when they're out like, oh, no, now they're going to destroy it. Yeah. If you put $7 billion into something, your first idea is obviously to flush it down the toilet, right? But the problem with that is that if you don't communicate with people, like we did not do, about that, they're going to be very conspirational. So they're going to come up with shit that you think it's the JFK murder again. So what happened was that we released the game, the target audience was really pissed off because they said, all the terrible things we just couldn't imagine how terrible they were. You actually implemented it. But it wasn't actually true because they thought a lot worse than that. But even worse was that every time a positive gamer came into our forums and said, you know what, I really like this game, but I got stuck at level 8. He was jumped by this crowd who just tore him apart and said, how can you like this game? It's shit. There you go. That's your demanding audience. Same thing is going to happen if you move into something that is, say, Dungeon Keeper-esque. You just inherit the audience, right? Now, Dungeon Keeper is a bad example, and you all know why. On the other hand, you can get away with cloning as well. Because the negative perception is much less in certain areas. And we've seen this as well. First of all, low engagement target audiences. We're talking mobile. There's a reason why it works to steal other people's names and steal other people's gaming concepts on mobile. Splashy Fish, for example. It's because people are not that engaged. There is no die-hard fan of Flappy Birds who's going to write like 10 pages on a forum about Flappy Birds. Maybe a Flappy Birds convention, though. On the other hand, you never know. But when it comes to, for example, Minecraft, it's a totally different story. There's also something called underserved niches. Is this mic turned off? Now it is. Yeah, cool. And these are niches where people still are craving a lot of content. There are like, you can take, for example, city building is a good example right now. Because you all know what happened to SimCity 5. If that had been a huge success, the market would have been totally taken by EA. Now the market is totally open. And we're getting back to SimCity 5 as well. I think another underserved niche are simulators in general. I would say that Flight Simulator is another niche that probably could be filled by this. It's a bit of a stretch budget-wise to make a Flight Simulator. But for anyone who could, you'll inherit a lot of bonus fans and you'll be alone in the market if you plan to do that. My own guess is that space is the new thing. So if you want to release a space game, I think you should do it before 2016, because I think the space is what people are doing right now. You know, black holes and wormholes in space and all that crap. I was talking about target audience and how to work with the target audience. The target audience that you inherit, I now assume that you make something that at least can be seen as something that is similar to something else. They will have very specific ideas of what you can do with your game. We know that at Paradox. When we started making Hearts of Iron 4, a lot of people, or if it was Hearts of Iron 3, I have one of the Hearts of Iron 4 developers here, so I'm not sure which game it actually was. It was in the Hearts of Iron series. We presented a new screenshot, and first comment was last. This is not Hearts of Iron. This is not Hearts of Iron. Like, make it the real game. Like, make it the game we actually own. So our fans have a very specific feeling that they own our franchises, which is a good thing. It makes them loyal, but it also puts a lot of pressure on us, both to deliver and to communicate. They will have ideas about your game design. They will have ideas about how you conduct your business. They will have ideas about the price point, the DLC plan, how you patch the game, essentially everything. So how do you put all of this together get the customers on your side, and work in a methodological way to actually stand out in the market, given the assumptions that we have here. First of all, I was not going to touch that much on game design, but I'm going to at least mention it because it's an important way. I'm going to mention it from a methodological standpoint. Standing out, basically, is making people believe that you do things that no one has ever done before. And it can be done in a few different ways. This is actually how we do things at Paradox. We try to imagine what people are doing when they're not playing the game, just imagining the game. So, of course, in game design, you can make your characters stand out. We try to do that for every game. How many in here played Magica? Huh? Quite a few. And how many would recognize a Magica wizard if you saw one on the street? That's even more people. That's a good job from our marketing department. That kind of proves my point. If you see someone cosplaying as your game, what do they dress in then? My absolute favorite cosplay for me would be Super Meat Boy. I would love that costume, the full Super Meat Boy costume. I'm not going for the t-shirt here because that's beautiful too, but the full Super Meat Boy outfit. That is really interesting. So the characters in your game, how do they stand out and how are they a character in itself? So when they walk on the street, people will recognize and say, wow, Magica. Or, who? That's Gears of War. Very important. Same goes for art and level design. You should almost see on the colors that it's your game, obviously. On the marketing side, we release, that is also interesting to see that we invent characters not only in our games, but also in everything else we do, in the communication, in the trailers that we do, in everything that has to do with the game. How many saw the trailer for our game Leviathan Warships? Anyone? Yeah, quite a few. So that game, we invented a character called Jazz Boatman. This all goes back to that we had no really good budget to make a cool trailer because it's a game about boats and explosions. So this guy talks in a smooth voice that sounds like Barry White, and it goes on for 1.5 minutes explaining boats and making boat jokes like ship just got real. So that trailer cost us, I think, $500 to make, and it got close to 1 million views now on YouTube. It's our most viewed trailer up to date. Still our cheapest trailer as well. It's because the groundwork that we did, like what is the character going to be? How is he going to be perceived by the market? What is the actual things we want to say only from this character? Never mind the game. This is just the character. If he wants to describe this game, how would he do it from his couch position where he is Jazzy Boatman playing the game but not being in the game? Right? And these are the things that we look at on the side here. Play it, obviously the game in itself. When you play the game, what do? Read it. If your game was a book, what would the book be about? Would it be a funny book? Would it be sad? Would it be ironic? What would be the actual feeling? When you read this book and you're finished with the book, what does the reader take with them to the next book, to the sequel of this book? Wear it, like I was mentioning before. If you cosplay your game, what are you cosplaying the game like? I mentioned the Magica Wizards, which is obviously for Magica. For our historical games, it's much harder to say. Hearts of Iron is World War II, which is more generic. But instead, in Hearts of Iron, it's a very deep strategy game. And so you can't use Churchill, and you can't use these big leaders. So we use Douglas MacArthur as our main character. Very characteristic character. So if you want to cosplay Hearts of Iron, you'll probably go as Douglas MacArthur. Watch it. Same thing if your game was a movie. What would the movie be about? Who would be the lead actors in your movie? We think the Magica would probably be Eddie Murphy playing the lead Red Wizard. Maybe not. We'll see. We'll see about that. Will Ferrell, maybe? We don't know. That is very interesting to say, because once you sit down and you compare, like, okay, so we're making a Magica movie. Who is making the voices? Because you can't see the faces of the wizards. It's only the voices. Who is playing that? What personality does that give your game when you talk in between each other? So build it. How do you include your target audience? Modding is a big part of our community, for example, but it can be other things as well. If you welcome fan art, for example, for your project, what is that fan art going to be? How do you inspire people to make things for your game that people just feel that creativity flows through them? And preach it. Very important. What does other people say about your game when they talk to their friends? I know that we marketed our Europa Universalis series when we released the third one. Just a second. As we said to people like this: maybe this game is a little bit too hard for you. So people were like, what? Yeah, we said this game might be a bit too hard. It's very, very advanced strategy. Yeah, okay, I have to check that out. So it was a form of anti-marketing. So we were not pushing things in people's faces, but we said, like, when you tell your friends about Europa Universalis, it's going to be, you know what, I'm playing this awesome game, but you probably don't understand how to play it because it's very advanced. So that's how we spread the word on our strategy games. From a communication standpoint, when it comes to peer-to-peer. And this sounds almost like we're being a sect here, which is kind of awesome in itself. But live it. When this game embraces your entire life, and you do nothing else than live within this like gaming community, gaming franchise, what does your everyday life look like? And you just try to imagine. I have to get back to Super Meat Boy and do all of these. I feel that. So this is how we do things at Paradox. When we try to like think outside the game, seeing like, okay, we have the game, but everything else around that, how are we going to make it stand out so that everyone, when they see it, like, bam, there it is. That's the game. Giving it personality. Standing out as well is obviously, like I said, not only the games in itself, but also the business that you do. How do you update what you're doing? What is your DLC policy like? What is your patching policy? And what is your consumer promise, as we call it? What do you say to customers? How do you say to customers, like, this is what we're going to deliver. This is how we're going to support the game over this period of time. So basically, this is what you can expect from us when we release this game. The most expensive part, but the part that people use the most to stand out, is technology. The problem with using technology, explosions, lighting effects, and all of that, is that the big studios will always win that race. The bigger the studio, the more things they can do to make the game stand out from a technological standpoint. And you know that studios has very little to show in terms of standing out when Fish AI is one of the selling points. Right? Then you haven't really done your read it, wear it, watch it, live it. Fish AI, people. But let's see here if I took. Another thing here on the I have to take a story here. One part of the consumer promise is support, obviously, and we are trying to teach our developers to be good at support. We're trying to teach each other every day to be good at support. When I get an angry email, when I get an abusive email like, I hope you die and I hope your company goes bankrupt, these emails come in every now and then I write the most abusive reply you can ever think of, like this long. Often in the evening, I have a beer and I write an abusive reply. And then I take a walk in my apartment. I walk around a bit, and then I come back to my computer, and then I say, in your face, and then I delete the mail. But I have to get it out of the system. But you can never treat customers like that. We had a developer who replied on the forums, Someone said like this, our game does not start with this type of video card. And the developer replies, it's not a problem because it's only 2% of the computers. Imagining walking into the doctor's office. Walk into the doctor's office and you say, hey, I have cancer. And the doctor says, you know what, it's not really a problem because only 2% of my patients even have cancer. That's not the reply you're looking for, right? Because you have a problem, and the problem you want someone to sort it out for you. At least, if you can't do anything else, tell them we're working on it, even if you're not working on it, right? If you can't say anything, say that you have nothing to say, or say at least like, we're so sorry, we screwed this up totally, here's your money back, and I hope that we'll fix it sometime in the future. The problem is not normally communicating. If you're not super bad at communicating or super abusive, it's the lack of communication. If you take, again, we take SimCity 5 as an example and compare that to when Blizzard released Diablo 3. Releases were similar because you couldn't play the game. And they were both demanded online play, and you couldn't connect. EA was silent for 2 weeks. They didn't say a thing. And the first thing they released was a sponsored gas station for SimCity 5. While they had hourly updates from Blizzard on the Diablo 3 situation. So, in the end there, Blizzard will never be remembered for that release of Diablo 3. Maybe a bit though, because it was kind of bad. But SimCity 5 is still have scars from that release. And that's the first thing people mention when there's an article about the game. Which is sad, because in itself, the game is not bad. It's a fairly good game. More methods on making your game stand out. I was mentioning how we look at things around the game, how we're trying to give the game a personality, and how we work without a paradox. But you can also look at what your competitors are doing. So benchmarking is a very good tool to use. You can just have comparison charts saying, what types of features, what type of features does my competitor have? Because you probably have a competitor in the market. And what feature set do I have? And then you compare them and say, okay, can we see what features are actually the most important to keep in the game? Because a lot of game developers tend to think that a lot of features is better than fewer features. But there is an example to that as well. 2 free-to-play games, Battlefield Heroes and World of Tanks. They're not exactly similar though, but they're like shooting games, multiplayer games online. Battlefield Heroes was released many years before World of Tanks. They had infantry, they had tanks, they had planes, they had everything. World of Tanks, they only have tanks. Tanks is what they do. Tanks, if you cosplay World of Tanks, you come as a tank, probably. Or as a turret, maybe, I don't know. They even have their own personality. Like, one of my kids said like, I said like, do you play World of Tanks? And she said, well, no, I've heard about it in school. Isn't that the game Counter-Strike for retired people? And I'm like, yeah, that's a great tagline. I'm like, wow, I would use that. If I was Victor Kisley at Wargaming, I would totally use that. Counter-Strike for retired people. I'm one of them because I'm a bit too slow to play Counter-Strike. But it's funny because World of Tanks has a very specific personality. And that is one of the things that helped the game become great. Battlefield Heroes did not at the same, they were trying to be everything for everyone. But the feature set and the feature list was just too long for anyone to digest. When you do that benchmarking, you quickly come up with what is your competitive edge as a company. Like, what do you do better than your competitors? What can you over-deliver on that your competitors cannot? And how can you implement that satisfactorily to the customers? You can also do a market analysis. Like 10 years ago, you had to subscribe to NPD to get data for America, all the sales data. We did that. We spent like $40,000 a year, and we were a small company back then. But it was only to get the sales data in retail that you needed just to check that all your reports were correct from your distributor, and to check how much did our competitors actually sell. Is there other genres that are just as interesting as ours? But today, you can just Google it. Everything is one Googling away. Like iTunes, Android, everything. All these numbers are fairly open. Even analytics firms are fairly accurate with their Steam numbers. I mean, we compared some Steam numbers to some analytics figures. It's in the same ballpark, definitely. So what you can do easily now is just Google, what numbers are you looking for? Because finding them is super easy. Another thing here on the benchmarking that I forgot to mention is that you need to find in here some sort of key performance indicators, key numbers, what you follow up on. It's not only regarding the game, but also regarding how the customer behaves. It could be on the customer side, like number of support tickets. It could be how quickly you respond, how many negative reviews you get on Steam if you release the game on a PC, or your overall review numbers on mobile, for example. On, let's see, it's... also trying to identify how individuals behave within a certain game. And something that is very useful there is the use of achievements in a game. Some people use achievements solely for a marketing purpose. But you can also use it to measure exactly what people are doing in the game and trying to give people more of that same experience. So if 100% of the people got one achievement, maybe that was opening the game, so that was too easy. But the rest of the achievements that are not super easy or super hard, how many of them did people actually fulfill? And how do we give them more content that is actually like that? Not all companies can measure exact customer activity. It might be that the Steam interface doesn't let you do that. It might be that the mobile interface doesn't let you do that. It's only probably the people who have direct connection with their customers who can measure it. But there are also workarounds, like how do you measure achievements, for example. So the more achievements you have, you can do that with Steam trading cards as well, if you like. So once you're done on the market, you need to be brutally honest with yourself. So just as much work needs to be spent internally as you do externally when you develop a game. Depending on, if you're up to 5 people, everyone can communicate with everyone on a daily basis. You just need to like stretch over and say, hey, what's going on? And then everyone knows what's going on in the entire company. But being brutally honest to yourself is very hard. It's maybe you should have someone coming in from the outside helping you to be brutally honest. In the Paradox management team, we sit down once a year and we give brutally honest feedback. So you have to say 2 positive things and 1 negative thing about every member of the team. And the negative thing can never be, oh, sometimes you work too much, because that's just a bullshit excuse for not being like able to give feedback. You have to say like, you know what really annoys me? It's that you don't report properly on your sales stuff, for example. It's good. Brings the company forward. This builds up to, once you're done with that, it builds up to your organizational strength. When you know what every individual can deliver in a team, and when you know what you personally can deliver, you have your organizational strengths just lined up for you. And if the previous slide defined a bit of customer needs, you can see here, what can our organization actually deliver? Once we're through with what we can do, how we stand out against our competitors, strength, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, compared to what we think our competitors can do. And how do we bridge the gap in between this and the customer needs that we saw on the previous slide? Okay. This all boils down to the studio USP. So the day that you're going to tell everyone how great your studio is, these are the things that you're going to use. It's going to be the 5 things that you're best at. And typically, it doesn't do anyone anything good to be working on what you're weak at. Just trying to balance up your weak spots is not going to make you a better company. Focus much more on what you're already good at and be the best in the world at that specific topic on what you're actually doing. Again, tanks. If you do tanks really well, you can sell a lot of units. One mistake that I see developers do every now and then as well is, in this case, is not to follow their passion. They're trying to fill a gap in the market that they see, but they're not really passionate about the game that they're actually making. So the questions you're going to be asking both yourselves and your team members is, do I think about this game all the time? Do I bring my ideas back to home and annoy my spouse with it during dinner conversation? Do I play this game in alpha in the evenings when I get back from work? And if you don't, you're working on the wrong game. And you have to think again and make something that you're actually passionate about, because you're definitely doing the wrong thing. Using yourself as benchmark, as I say, is super underestimated in this industry. People are trying, you can use all the market analysis in the world, you can use a lot of different things that you know about, all the numbers and everything. But if you think something is really good, if you laugh at something, if you have fun with something, I bet you'll be able to sell that product much better than if you don't, even if the game that you're making is technically perfect. So getting started on this, how much time do I have? Anyone has the time?
15 minutes.
Huh?
16 minutes.
16, okay, I'll speed this up. Getting started. The most important thing that we set, I was touching on this a bit with the read it, play it, watch it, wear it, etc., is setting the product vision. And why do you set a product vision? It's to get all the major influencers in the company looking at the same target goal. It's also a good way to communicate externally what you're trying to achieve with the game. An example there are no examples of games being shipped that are not teamwork in this industry, with one example, and that's Minecraft, which is probably one man's work, mostly. A good vision can summarize the feeling when you play the game and make everyone understand what you're trying to achieve. A good vision you can look at every day and say, my daily work is being done and I'm following the vision that is our overall goal with this product. One such example is actually SimCity, which is saying build the city of your dreams. That's a really good vision. It's really simple to understand, good tagline. For Europa Universalis, we've used be a Renaissance emperor. Very easy to understand. What kind of decisions are you making? How do you play the game? How do you feel when you play the game? Gears of War, allegedly, I'm not sure if this is true, but if I understand correctly, they used an even more down-to-earth vision when they created their game. They said Marcus Phoenix is a total badass. And how is that a vision? Well, everything he does is badass. He doesn't open doors, right? He kicks doors in. That's badass. You don't open the door like this. You just BAM! So if you're a designer and you see that vision, Marcus Phoenix is a badass, how does he behave? How does that affect the gameplay? How does that affect marketing in the game? Examples of really bad visions is, we're going to make the best strategy game in the world. And why is that a bad vision? Because best is a very subjective matter. No one can look at that and say, okay, so, is this real-time or turn-based? Like, it doesn't make sense at all. So the vision should be simple for everyone in the team to understand. I said use yourself as benchmark. And the be crazy part I just added because, as I say, like, what you like and you're trying to sell, if you twist it around a bit, other people are going to like that too, because that's how the market works. You take the vision, you boil it down, you sell the idea internally when all the stakeholders are on board with this vision. Typically, you have to sit down in a locked room until you come up with your product vision. There are many ways to do this. I could have one session only on how to set the product vision, because that takes probably a few hours to explain. But lock people in a room, maybe a few beers, and then you don't walk out until all the major stakeholders are on board on the same page. You can then take the vision and say, okay, you're in charge of programming. What do you do to fulfill the vision in your daily work? 5 tasks in your daily work. You're the lead artist. How do you make sure that this vision is followed on a daily basis? These 5 bullet points or 3 bullet points, you can take back to your team and say, this is how we work to fulfill our vision. This is the grand vision. This is what we do to fulfill our part of this grand vision. Makes it so much easier for people to understand, both internally and externally. It's super good for communication as well, because it sets the whole pace for trailers that you're making, for communication that you're making. Magica is a perfect example of everything. Everything in Magica, every single line that someone says is a reference to popular culture. Everything in the game. That includes all the trailers. It includes all the achievements. It includes everything. I only get about 33% of that, but when I sometimes get it, I really find it, I really laugh. I was standing next to this building called Graham's Workshop, which looks a bit like Games Workshop in the logotype because it's yellow and red. And the guy next to Graham's Workshop says, when I click a dialogue, he says, someone at Graham's Workshop told me that in a distant future there is only war. I find that kind of scary. And I started laughing. No one? Okay, we'll take that later. Write that down and we'll take it later. It's also important that you keep the vision true as a team. You challenge each other. You go up to, even if you're not an artist, you can go up and say, you know what? How is this badass? How is this art actually badass? Is this something that we want to stand for and we want to be behind when we release a game with the vision we already agreed upon? Another thing that I think is underestimated, I'm going to hurry up a bit here, it's naming the game. Just such a simple thing, because naming a game takes forever. First of all, you have to search all the trademark databases and all that, and then you have to figure if your name is a funny meaning in a foreign language, and yeah, there's so many things. Keep it simple. I love the old Eidos way of naming games. You are what you play. They did Hitman, Championship Manager, Thief. Super simple. Only downside is that it's not Googleable in the same way that a very strange name like Europa Universalis, if you Google that, you'll only get hits on Paradox. So, there are downsides to everything. From the vision, we boil it down to a consumer promise as well. Like, what is the package that we promise to deliver to a consumer? So what we do is ask ourselves, through the communication that we've done, through all the vision things that we've communicated out to the customers, everything communication-wise, what do we think the people playing the game for the first time will actually experience? What will be their first reaction? What's the reaction we're after? We're trying to envision that. Okay, so this is what they're going to do. That's what we call the player fantasy. Because sometimes people have higher expectations on your game than you can actually deliver. And trying to match the player fantasy with what you actually deliver, or even exceed the player fantasy, is a very hard balance as well. What is our commitment to deliver that? And I was mentioning name and brand as well. Another part of that they can use just as a toy of like coming up with what is actually unique about this game, what makes it stand out, are a few things like in sales you often use an elevator pitch, which means that if you go up from elevator from floor 1 to floor 50 and you have to explain to a big time CEO your business model, how does that sound? Because you only have 20 seconds. Same with your game. I tried this on my parents. And my parents, they're a very hard sell because they're 70 years old and they never play games. So I tried to sell Europa Universalis to my mom first, and she refused to listen. And then my dad said like, oh, that sounds interesting. And he said something really smart back at me. He's like, oh, that takes a lot of research on maps, doesn't it? And I'm like, I got him. Like, so I'm just taking him in now. But the only game he actually played was Fruit Ninja and then some Wii Sports. So it's a tough sell for a hard strategy game. Everything, I was touching actually on key performance indicators and numbers earlier on, but it's very important for any organization to find the numbers that you're using to measure yourself. What are the numbers? The most common numbers are, for example, a Metacritic score. The Metacritic score doesn't say that much, to be honest, about the game. Probably the user score on Metacritic says more about your game than the actual Metacritic score does. But check out how long are your average player sessions, and does that match up with how you thought that people would play the game? Did you think that people would play the game for 1 hour at a time and they're only playing 20 minutes? Well, where is the bridge? Why are you failing to deliver that 1 hour on average session to the gamer? And what are you going to do about that? We're into, again, engaging the fans. We've been touching a bit of this on inheriting fans and all that. And the most important thing, I mentioned that as well, with only 2% having the problem. That is not really respectful. So important is that even if you think that people are wrong, just be respectful. Because trust is the most valuable asset that you have, especially as an independent developer or a developer with limited resources. I say, like, treat all your gamers, I say to myself, like I treat my mother-in-law. Because with my mother-in-law, I have to live with her for the rest of her life, or my life, depending on who kicks the bucket first. But you have to live with your customers for the rest of your lives. And this spreads very quickly. It spreads very quickly. Listening versus hearing on the customer side as well. There are many more people than you are. The collective knowledge of the people playing your games is bigger than the knowledge that you can have in your company. It's true for any company out there, even for Apple with thousands of employees. The collective knowledge of the people using Apple's product and their knowledge is bigger than Apple's own. So if you listen to your customers, you will do what they tell you to do. If you're hearing what they're saying, you will hear between the lines what they need to have going forward. And there's a classic quote here from Henry Ford, one of the inventors of the car, who said, like, if I had listened to my customers, I would try to breed faster horses, right? But what they were actually saying was that I want to get faster from point A to point B, not that they actually wanted faster horses. Yeah, I have some examples of that. If they say in SimCity 5, we want a bigger map, what people are probably saying is that we want to have longer and more advanced gameplay settings or a gameplay universe. People say about Europa Universalis, I probably don't understand this game. What they're saying is that I would love to have a really advanced tutorial. If someone says, this is a true story, I'm going to read here. I want a refund for this piece of crap you sold to me after playing 1,200 hours, which we could see on Steam. What he's actually telling us, because it's awesome to have a customer playing 1,200 hours, then sending this email is a bit out of character. But what he's telling us is that if you had updated this game, I would have been buying every piece of DLC that you've ever released. But now he's just sad that we abandoned the game, because we did, unfortunately. Fans, I'm going to touch on the world champions of treating your customers well, or at least making the customers believe they're treated well are Valve. They turned Team Fortress 2 into a totally customer-driven economy, making it now the third most played game on Steam, actually, every day, every month. One of the things that we say that the collective knowledge is bigger than the outside knowledge is that when you create your game, you're a limited crowd of people, and then you have it out to a huge crowd of people that can look at it, mod it, make changes, come with feedback. 5 of the 10 most played games on Steam started out as mods. I actually checked it just yesterday. And that's actually true. People do something that they care about, or they have their passion, and it ends up being this fantastic game. We call it the Dota factor within every game. So Warcraft 3 was incredibly popular. The mod Dota became even more popular than anyone could ever imagine. So I'm gonna jump through this very quickly and see if I have any questions in the end here. I'm building the fan base. Just how you're gonna build the fan base step by step here. What kind of culture? If your game and your company was a country, what country would it be? And how would it welcome people? How would it communicate with people? What sort of common language do you share with your customers? What do you celebrate in terms of ceremonies? What references do you have in common? If someone would symbolize your game or company, what kind of symbol would they use for the company? What legends do they tell about you? How good are you as a storyteller about your company? Because the company standing out is just as important as the game standing out in itself. Because a standout company can release mediocre games and get away with it because they're a standout company. I'm not going to take any examples here, though, but it's very interesting. So how, in essence, do you create the sense of belonging that you want for your gamers? That they belong to what you're doing. So if I'm going to summarize what I've said here, divide it up to product, company, team, we say at Paradox that passion makes perfect, meaning that passion is more important than strategy. Passion is more important than everything you do in the game because it means that you're willing to work hard to succeed and to complete what you're doing. First of all, if I'm just going to set some advices here, is to set your vision and get your team on board with that. Make sure to communicate what your vision and your consumer promise is to the people who are supposed to play your games. And be passionate and follow your heart when it comes to everything, not only to the game, but to the marketing and to the business of the game. That's all. Thank you. So now I've been talking for an hour. Any questions? Yes.
Microphone here, if you can use it, please. Hello. I have a question about your internal methods and being brutally honest to yourselves.
Yep.
What do you do if someone on the development team loses his passion during the game they're working on, and how do you proceed with this?
That's a very good question. How do we get the passion going? When we have introduction days at Paradox, we have one full day. That's how we start, at least. We have one full day of presentations. I always start in the morning, telling Paradox history, the organization, a lot of boring things. I always end my presentations with saying, you know what? When you walk into this office 2 weeks in a row or so, and you don't feel that you're having fun, come to me, and I'll help you get a better job than the job that you have here at Paradox. I swear. So that's how we start, like setting it straight, saying like, it's mandatory to have fun at Paradox. Nothing else actually counts. But keeping the passion in the team is actually something ongoing. That is more like you try to have peer-to-peer evaluations and all of that, but it's very hard and very tricky to do. So I don't really have a straight answer on that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The target group of some video game genres, especially war games, is pretty hardcore and traditional, and they like certain aspects of gameplay that are recurring to the series. So how do you balance innovations in game and also stay true to your fan base and make the games that they are used to and love?
How we stand true to the brand and at the same time try to make new things.
Yes.
Actually, I think a lot of if you take war games or for example, Hearts of Iron as an example of that, I think that we have hidden a lot of what is actually fun in the game underneath the surface in the past. I think that probably everyone in the world can enjoy a good war game because it's like the basis of what you play even now today. War games are the foundation of a lot of games. So in our case, I think one of the challenges, we have one of the Hearts of Iron developers here, so you can talk to him later on. Hand up here. I think one of the challenges that we have is trying to lift it up to the surface and telling people like, this is actually what is fun in this game, and this is how you learn it. So it's a lot of interface issues, actually. So it's very technical, what is fun in the game. But also on our end, to communicate, this is what you can do in the game, this is the feeling you should have when you're playing the game. So it's both. A bit like lifting up what's fun, and the other one is communicating. It's not just a war game. It's like you're ruling the world, sort of, that feeling. So a little bit of everything.
We have one more question.
Yep.
Hi. You've been talking about that you do have, you need your developers to have passion for the game when they do the game, and that they love to play the game. You were also talking about that you need to listen to your customers, and that your customers are satisfied, and that they are kept incorporated into the process in some way. Yep. Do you ever have the situation that the developers and your customers were drifting apart in their vision, and how do you handle that? I mean, if the team has an idea about where they want to go and it's totally not what the customers want, what do you do then?
Well, we have that all the time, actually, and there are several ways to get people on board, get the customers on board at an early stage. What our strategy game teams are doing really well is to release developer diaries, where you explain bits of gameplay, like every week you explain new things of the gameplay, because that gets more and more people on board. They're like, oh yeah, this sounds really smart, and then you're very active in communication. And you can also be like, you can listen to the fans, but you should also be very, very clear what they can say about the game. Saying like, you know what, we're hearing what you're saying, but this is how it will be. So you're not fooling people to believe that they have influence over something that they won't. And then people can choose either to say, okay, that's sad, but probably I'll play the game again, or they'll be really happy about that. So it's typically a dual situation. But sometimes, in the past at least, we did polls on the forums as well. So we asked people like, do you want Paradox to do this next? And then we had like, yes, because I love games, or no, because I'm a boring person. And then we got like 97% yes. So it depends on how you ask the question as well. It was not that obvious though, but it depends a lot. Like if you want people to like really be on your side, it depends a lot on how you ask the question as well.
Oh, is that microphone
not working? Oh.
Okay.
We've got one last question here.
Hi. How important do you think language localization is to engage people?
I think language localization is quite important, especially since there are basically just a few territories where you can release English games. It's North America, it's UK, Netherlands, Nordic territories. Apart from that, if you want to reach the high sales numbers, I think localization is very important. And it's always, for us, it's always a balance in between localize or not. Because if you take, for example, Europa Universalis, it's like 600,000 words or something, and Europa Universalis 4. So it's always a stretch. But I think as a concept, localization is really important to get into every local market. Now that you have digital distribution as like a global support on almost all platforms.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.